Hello and welcome to the Indy Author podcast. Today, my guest is Joe Solari. Hey, Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Matty. Thanks
It
for
is
having
great
me on.
seeing you. Oh, I'm happy to have you here. And to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Joe Solari helps authors build great businesses through books, courses, and podcasting, as well as strategy and operations consulting. He's the author of Advantage, Harnessing Cumulative Advantage in the Winner-Take-All Publishing Market, and May I Have a Moment of Your Attention, How to Get Your Message Heard in a Noisy Market. And we're going to be talking about Joe's Author Marketing Audit. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting about this audit is that as I was reading through the 20 questions that are available to authors as part of the audit, the terminology was much more like what I was used to hearing when I worked as a project manager in the corporate world. And I'm curious to hear a little bit of background on what was your experience that led you up to where you are now, focusing on the author business.
Sure. So it's really interesting because nothing could prepare you for the world that we're in today, right? It isn't like when I went to school, which was I don't know, a long time ago, that you could go take a course that would get you ready for this. Or if there was a course on publishing or being an author, it had nothing to do with what's available today. So my background is I've been entrepreneurial my whole life. I've owned and operated multiple businesses across all kinds of industries. So water treatment, oil and gas, nothing related to publishing until this last iteration. And all of that experience kind of got me prepared for how I could help authors today. How I got into it specifically was during my last business that I was doing, a startup in the oil and gas industry. My wife wrote a book. This was 2014, 2015. And she was having some issues with how she had set up her account. And I went in to look and I found out that she had made $4,000 in a month selling a book about t-shirts and jeans. And I got interested.
Yes,
I didn't,
that
didn't
is
know that.
attention getting.
Yeah, I didn't know that was possible. Right. It was like and I wasn't trying to be dismissive. I was busy with my other business. And it was like, she was going to write a book and she had some friend who was helping her. It was like, great. And then when I saw this, it was like, wow, I got really interested. Now, fast forward a bit, she could write a book, I could write a book. So when I sold that business, I decided, well, I was going to take a swing at this. And I wrote a book about business practices for creatives because my undergrad, my bachelor's in fine art, and then I have an MBA from University of Chicago. And so I've got this weird mix of like creative and analytical. So I'm like, well, I'll write a book for creatives. And it was, like most nonfiction books, it didn't really sell, but the few people that did pick it up were ones that were just like I was looking for, focused on, being able to make a living from their writing and trying to apply business practices. So that brought me into speaking at events. Probably the biggest group I've been involved with is the 20 Books group, and speaking there. And that's where I was brought into like, oh, wow, there's these authors writing fiction that were making just amazing amounts of money. And to my horror, really, some of them didn't even have companies set up. Like there was just no business practices at all because, 6 months before that, they were stay-at-home mom, right? And so there was just this big gap in resources in that space that I had the experience to fill. So that's what I've been doing since 2016 is, really focusing on how to help authors use business practices to up their game. And, there's no reason why somebody that's a talented writer should really understand a lot of this stuff. Most small business owners don't know this stuff, nor have a really easy place to go to. So that's been really my focus is really trying to help this community keep the money that they make.
And is there anything beyond that that specifically spurred the creation of the marketing audit?
Yeah. So that's probably more of my personal journey. And like when I came in to help authors, it was really easy to just kind of apply general business practices. Like, hey, you need to set up a company when you get to this level, and you need to do these things like pay yourself a payroll and all the things that like any small business owner should do based on the size of their business. But then after spending this time in the industry, it's just kind of the way I am. dug in deeper and deeper. And to kind of frame this out, what I mainly do today is I have a private client group, a partner who's a CPA, and we run the back offices for high six-figure, seven-figure authors. And in that process of seeing all these businesses across all these different genres, I had to start thinking of like, what are the things that are author specific and indie publishing specific that need to be adjusted or tweaked for these business models. And the most obvious thing for it was around marketing. There's a lot of things that come out of marketing from the digital marketing or direct mail marketing space that sort of work, but they probably need to be tweaked a bit. So that's where a lot of my research has been. And the premises of these different 20 things in those questions all lead to things that I feel, if you focus on, really change your marketing trajectory.
Well, I went through the 20 questions and I picked out some that sort of stood out to me and that I think are a good entree to, a more complex and more sophisticated dive into the author marketing audit. And so, as I understand it, someone who's taking this audit is saying, I strongly agree or I strongly disagree that this statement applies to me, and that's the way they assess their author business. And so the one that struck my attention, struck my fancy right off the bat was, I use the natural forces of a popularity market to propel my publishing business. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Go for the deepest, most complex one right out the bat. Yeah. So to frame it, like the idea here is you read that statement and then you rank yourself on it, right? From 0 to 5, come up with a score. And while that's, you know, it's not hard science, what you can do with this information is you come back after doing work in that area and reassess yourself and see if you have more confidence in that area, right? This one specifically is a great one to start with, because one of the things that's probably the hardest thing for an author to deal with is that the marketplace that they're in is what's called a popularity market or a winner take all market. And power law carve market. There's all these different names for it, but it doesn't operate like a regular market in the sense of like, if anyone's, the listener's taken Econ 101, first day they draw that little chart on the table, or on the chalkboard of, now I'm dating myself saying chalkboard, right? Um, supply and demand meet on these curves and that sets the price. And by a shift in demand or supply, price changes and it all gets to some equilibrium. Well, that's not true in our marketplace. There's only 1% of the marketplace that makes most of the money. And this isn't stuff that is not confirmable. Like you just look at the Amazon bookstore and how the Amazon bestseller rank works on titles. And you need about 120,000 as a daily rank to be showing you're selling a book a day. So that means out of what they suspect is about 14 million books in the ebooks, that's less than 1% are selling a book or more a day, right? And like if you're an author, one title selling a book a day does not pay the bills. So once we understand that's how the market works, like you get to two places. One is like, wow, this is really a dismal thing that I have to face this really steep curve of success. But then also understand that same steep curve gives you momentum once you start understanding the parts and pieces of a popularity market and using them to your benefit. Because what we know about popularity markets is there's a social aspect, right? So people don't just like to go look at art. They like to talk about the art they look at, whether that's on TV or reading a book or going to a museum, right? It's, oh, did you go to the Van Gogh show? Yes, I did. What'd you think of this? Right? Like that's part of the experience. And the more that we can find commonality on that, the more your audience grows. So when you start to like think about this as almost like a group psychology experiment, we can use those forces to our benefit. Now, the super cool thing is a platform like Amazon just amplifies this, right? Their objective is to match a customer and a product together as efficiently as possible. And what they're using is sales data and what other people look at. So if you can get your audience behavior really clean and clear for that algorithm to see, it will then amplify it and make this whole thing go faster. So it's like all these big positive feedback loops that feed into each other. And when you see people that take off, go viral, it's not something that happened overnight. It was all these pieces falling in and running and compounding to then take off. And then it's just it just keeps being self-fulfilling.
I'm going to skip down a few items because what you just described, I think, is a good lead into the next one I had a question about, which is I have a process map and understand all the customer journeys through my marketing.
So a lot of and this gets to thinking about marketing a little bit. So a lot of what you'll see talked about in marketing is what is the one-click buyer, this voracious reader that, if you get them into your series, they'll read the whole series. And with digital marketing, you can get a direct response really quickly. It's like I showed my ad to these people, they clicked on it, I can get some fuzzy information and attribution that they bought, and then they bought into my rest of my books. Great. Well, that's about 15% of readers. Most readers don't read series, they don't buy on the first click. And do you have all the different pieces in place to deal with the one-click buyer that buys right away and goes into your series? Do you have a process for somebody that they may see your ad, but doesn't really know you or your genre and needs to learn more? And when you start building those pieces for that other 85%, first off, you're just addressing a bigger market. And a lot of that stuff isn't anything that you need to be active in, like, hey, I see that you've clicked. I want to do this with you now. Those people are self-nurturing. So if you build those systems, then they will over time nurture, and then they will become a customer, and then they will repeat buy and all those things that you want them to do. So this particular point is about, do you even know what you have? And most people, when they do this, are like, oh my God, like there's all these gaping holes. And even the things I set up that I thought worked don't go where I thought they would. And on top of that whole thing, if you're like me, after you've been doing this for a while, you have to go and update it. And by having some kind of process map where you can see what you thought you did a year ago to kind of get restarted again, really saves you a lot of time, because I've been where I've gone into my marketing and been like, I know I spent a lot of time on this and it made sense back then, but this is confusing as hell to me. What happened?
Do you find among the authors you speak to that it's more likely that they have to uh, fill holes or cut back or just start from scratch? Like if you've dug yourself a hole, which is it better to try to dig your way out or just move to fresh ground?
I think it's iterative. So this will be a very common example for everyone. It doesn't matter where you are in your career. When you get started, you want to build a list, right? Building an email list is really important. So you'll use tools like list building tools and newsletter swaps and all the great things that are out there that I really believe are good marketing tools. And you'll get a list built, but then you'll realize that list isn't really that efficient, right? There's a lot of people that will say, oh, well, they're not, they're just free book seekers. Well, some are, some aren't, right? Some read your book and they just don't like it. Like what you have to do is don't just say, well, I'm never going to do that. Like say, well, how can I make that process better to help that person evaluate me as an author? So maybe, go back into it now that you have more of a better understanding of your own business. You go back in there and you rewrite those emails and you quit focusing on talking about you and kind of some of the author branding stuff and focus on, well, at this point, my objective is to get them to read my reader magnet. Like, I think my reader magnet is so good that if anybody who reads it that likes this genre, they will want to read more of my stuff, right? But do the emails actually help that person make that decision? And like when I look at a lot of authors, those first 3 emails that go out, it's like maybe that first sentence of that first email, maybe the only thing somebody ever reads of yours. Is it compelling? Does it make me want to read more? Does it make me want to put your book to the top of my to be read pile? Because the reality is most people that download a book that they find, say, on a book funnel promo or uh, through an ad that they may have gotten for lead generation, they're reading something else right now. So how do I handle knowing that's the most common situation? Do I talk to them about what they're reading now and see if I can like a personal, like hey, you're probably reading something else right now. What are you reading? It's kind of a long answer to the idea of like, it's a little bit of everything. I think what you find is that, you know, a lot of your work can be saved, but also understanding the different markets you're trying to go after. And, what we talked about earlier, 85% of the market being somebody that is not a one-click voracious reader. I found most authors have nothing, zero in place, because I think I'm the only person that really talks about this. So, and by the way, the work to do it, it's a lot of work. You have to build a system that works automatically and runs in the background so that it's not a quick. So I think that becomes the part where, like, if there's an area where there could be a lot of work, that most authors have the most work to do, it's in that.
Now, I can imagine when people hear the observation that many authors have holes in their marketing ecosystem, that they may jump on the approach that, well, I better be doing everything that's out there. And I don't think that's the recommendation. And if someone is either early in their career or they've been working away and they have kind of a mishmash of things and they don't have a good sense of what's working for them and what's not, or where to start and how to avoid overwhelm. When you're thinking about that, the process map, how do you identify the holes that should be filled immediately and the holes that maybe never need to be filled because they're not going to serve you and your audience appropriately?
Well, that's Maddie, that's a really interesting thing you brought up. And where my brain goes to first is not so much about the marketing, but about the process of becoming an author. And I think that a lot of the poor uh, messaging that gets put out there is that, well, this is easy. We just talked about how the market, it isn't. It's a complex, sophisticated market that a lot of people are coming in. But the other part of it is that you have to have some basic things in place for marketing to work. And I think what a lot of the messaging out there, and this is coming from people that sell marketing stuff, is, well, if you use the right marketing, anything will sell. And that's not true. And the reality of, for an author, where they need to spend the most time, money, and effort is on the product first. And that means writing books. And the biggest thing that you can do in the beginning is write the books. And I've got authors that are making a lot of money. And when I look across their history, most of them took 7 to 12 books to get to a point where things started to work for them. And it wasn't like boom overnight. Even with that 12th book, what happened was they found their audience, right? They found their voice, and they proved out over time that they could put out a product over and over again. Because it's not just a good book, if you're going after that uh, more active reader, can you put out a good book on a regular basis? And I'm not saying you have to put out a book a week or a book a month. I'm saying on a regular basis, whatever that is for you. And when you do that, then uh, you solve a lot of the problems that authors face, because you've gone through that process and an audience starts to collect around it. So now you can see that audience easier, because we're in an industry where it's really hard to see our audience. right? Especially when you're beginning and you should be using third-party platforms because that's where the audience is, right? So I think that as you look at this, you really probably should spend more of your time and money focus on the craft side, because in the end, if I pick up your book and I think it's garbage, I'm never going to pick up any more books.
Yeah.
You know?
The You had mentioned earlier the phrase self-nurture, which is another phrase that you don't often hear when people talk about author marketing or any kind of marketing, really.
Mhm.
So the item in the audit is my publishing business has a system for customers to discover my brand and self-nurture at their own pace. Can you talk a little bit about self-nurturing, especially for an author who's learning who their audience is?
Sure. So I can only use myself as an example. You may relate to this, you may not, but when I decide to buy something, usually by the time I get to the purchase point, I've done all my research and I've rationalized this purchase, right? And most authors, when they get their business really working, they don't have to sell their book anymore. They have an audience that's like, hey, we've read all your books. Where's the next one? Hop to it, right?
Yep.
They're ready to buy. They just need the product. So what do we have in place for somebody like me that's going to come on and on my schedule? Could be 3 a.m. I'm up, I can't sleep, and I'm looking for something to read. Or, your ad gets shown to me at 10 o'clock at night, and I decide I'm going to pursue that and go. How do you make it easy for me to understand what I'm getting myself into? What is the experience that you're going to deliver to me? Because you're in the experience business. It just happens to be delivered either through written or spoken word, right? So I like science fiction. So is it a science fiction genre? Is it the kind of science fiction I like, right? And can I go somewhere and learn this and along the process get to really old school marketing stuff, the whole know, like, and trust thing? And the reality is that the Amazon sales page is not designed for them. It used to be designed to kind of give you some pretty good feeling about a product, but in its latest iteration, it's designed to create real estate for advertising. So if you know you're advertising to an audience, it's that one click buyer and they're ready to buy and they like to buy on Amazon, then that makes sense to have that ad go there. But why wouldn't I be spending my money where I could bring them to a place where I could land them on my page that would be 100% my experience, that I can really set the tone for what I'm going to offer them. And in that process, maybe catch an email address so I can continue to market to them and start to know them better and potentially use some tools to retarget them. So, in the beginning, that might seem daunting. It's like, I got to write a book and then I got to build this page. And it's like, yeah, you do. um, that's, that's, it's a two-edged sword. Like you have the capacity today to really connect to your audience fast if you put those tools in place, but it means you have to do that work. Now, one little addendum on this whole thing is I think one of the things that a lot of, especially beginning authors, can get hung up on is the idea of, well, I'm just not a good marketer. I don't like to do this stuff. Don't think about it like marketing, but thinking about it like, how would you like to be treated as your customer and build those things in? Like, that's going to differentiate you in a massive way in the future because everybody's going to be using the same marketing tools and marketing tools optimized by AI. Find something that is clearly built by a human being and is speaking to a specific niche, they're going to hook into that really deeply because there's going to be this emotional connection that only comes out of that.
Is there a danger that authors limit themselves by putting themselves too much in the position of being their readership? So an author might love a certain kind of genre, but they like it with some unusual twist, some unconventional twist that's going to go against the
Mm,
conventions that their professed reader base likes. And so they pursue that, which could, I suppose, be very productive. But on the other hand, they're kind of making their journey harder by putting something unexpected in front of their audience. Is there a way to know when putting yourself in the position of the audience is helpful and when it might be harmful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. And it's the crux of this whole thing, I think, because um, I can think of people that have literally created subgenres out of the fact that the books that they wanted to read were not on the shelf. And they wrote to the audience of them. There just happened to be a lot of people like them. And I can't say, well, here's the step by step to do that. I do think that a lot of people make the mistake that they think that audience of them is bigger than it is. And they find themselves in like the wrong side of that equation where it's like, wow, I've written this for an audience of one. Why am I not selling any books?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I know some people rankle at the idea of writing a market, but, Gene Schwartz, who's a old school, direct marketers, one of his big things is uh, position your product to an unmet desire in the market versus trying to convert people to what you think the product is, right? Is helping people knowing that there's this large market that has this need, which we can see. And, especially today when there's all these companies that do marketing and say, hey, it looks like there's, an underserved need in Amish romance, or there's an underserved need in this market. And I'm not saying you should jump from genre to genre, but it's pretty easy today to quantify where there is opportunity in the marketplace. And understanding the expectations that there is. And maybe in the beginning, you have to govern how much of your self you're going to bring into that, right? And like if we're going to make it analytical, maybe it's in the beginning, it's 90-10. 90 is on market and this 10% is, what you think you need to bring to the market. And over time, that blend changes. And I can point to several authors that become wildly successful doing just that. I don't think it was as analytical as what I just laid out. I think it was just intuitive for them to do. But I'll be places and hear authors trying to case study how this particular book is so successful now. It's like, well, you can't just look at this book. You have to look at the 6 books before it that this author wrote and how they grew their audience at every single launch. And over time, there was this change. And then now there's this unique writing style that's clearly their brand that will probably change in the future. But if you go back here, you look at those first books, no, they were really on market and maybe too much on market. And that's why they didn't sell.
Just a quick break from the interview. Are you getting value from the podcast? Please consider supporting it and all the work I do at the Indy Author by becoming a patron. To pledge a monthly contribution, go to patreon.com/the Indy Author, or to make an occasional contribution, perhaps to indicate the value that a specific episode or resource provided to you on your creative voyage, scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. And now, back to the interview.
So, I do a thing called the Keystone Reader Survey where we do a massive survey of readers through email swap kind of thing we do, and worked with Kindlepreneur. They did the analytics on it. Hank Marcacci, who works for Kindlepreneur, helped these top-notch data scientists. And what we did is this last survey we did was all, and you can go to my site. Well, when we share links, there's data on this on my site. It was all open-ended questions. So it wasn't like multiple choice. Do you like Kindle it was like, what makes you pick up a book? And then we did word analytics where we went in and he did all this, AI kind of research stuff. And what came out of that is the single most important thing across all genres is character. It's the characters and the connection that people have with characters. So the cool thing about that is the next piece is there's a massive amount of research, and it's stuff that I talk about in Advantage. I can't remember the name of the researcher, but essentially what they did is they put people inside a functional MRI machine. So they're looking at the patterns of blood flow in their brain, and they asked them questions related to fictional people So like Cinderella, celebrities that they would not have met, like George Bush, and different contexts, different situations they would be in. So like my brother was talking to Cinderella yesterday. And so the idea is to see how fast people respond, what areas they light up. Well, what this research shows is, and this is the thing that I think is so important for authors to really understand when it comes to marketing, the same areas in our brains where we associate real human beings and our friends and family is the same place where our brain lights up when we are asked questions about our favorite characters. So inside your brain, when it comes to chemistry and electricity, there's no difference between your best friend and Harry Potter, if you're a Harry Potter fan. Now, what do you do with that information? Well, if you understand that some of your fans are having those kinds of experiences where your characters are manifesting that way inside their head, why would we not want to use that for our marketing? Why would we not want to because we're all looking for, human givens of like, we want to be connected to something. We want to have purpose in our life. We want to have belonging. We want to know where we fit in society. When you understand that you're actually playing in those parts of the brain where we form our deepest relationships like that, then quit trying to dazzle me with your copy and your marketing and focus in on how I'm already hooked on your character. How can that character bring me to where I need to be? How can that character bring me to your reader community? And then I can find, there's other real people that have that identical connection to this fictional person that aren't going to laugh at me, right? That understand this quirky thing I have with this particular character. And understand that becomes something that I own and I believe in to my core about your brand. Like that's the part that gets me so excited about this kind of marketing is when you start thinking about the psychological hooks that you have. That opens up doors that other product people just don't have. But we give away because it's like, well, everyone says I should just run these kind of ads, or I should have copy that says this, or we have to say buy now. I have to have a call to action. It's like,
Yeah.
You don't.
So let me know if I'm interpreting what you're saying too literally, but I had written an article for a blog, someone else's blog. And the way I approached it is that I had Anne, my protagonist of the one series. It was a text exchange between Anne and her brother,
Mhm.
which I used to illustrate, what their relationship is like. It's loving, but it's like a little frictiony, and to give a sense of, the things that they're texting back and forth about. They're kind of having an argument about something. So is it too literal to interpret what you're saying, that that's the kind of thing I could share with the audience I want to nurture, um, as opposed to, here's a sale on my latest book or something like that, that I should be making the characters even more real to these people than they already are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, I've said this before. It's like authors, I really think email is the most powerful medium that you can be interacting with your fans in, because they like to read and you like to write. The problem is you don't like to write emails to people about selling books. So don't make it about that. You don't, no one, there's nothing that says you have to do that. Now you have to listen to your audience and you need to try some of these things out. And you may find, like some people I've worked with, is the idea that works really well is I create a fictional character that's in this story world that their purpose is to be a marketing agent for me. And they're observing things in the world and able to kind of share the gossip of what's going on in my story world, that people can write them and you get questions answered, or they can see those texts that you're talking about. Now, what you typically tend to see when you do that stuff is engagement goes up, right? And what's the real purpose of that newsletter? The newsletter is really designed for you to retain your audience for when the next book comes out, right? you want to keep them in a state where when the time comes, you can go to your list and say, okay, of my 10,000 readers, this 2,000 here, I can see because of how I segmented them and what they've done. These are the people that have read up to book 6 in the series. And when book 7 launches, those are the people I'm going to email and say, book 7 is for sale, right? Just letting you know, book 7 is for sale. So they may in the previous part been getting lots of story-based, blurring of the fiction and reality type of emails. But then they get that one that's like, hey, just letting you know, you've been waiting. Book 7's out, right? Now, what happens when they get that email? Well, they really care about that, and they're going to go buy. And when you get those, let's say, like I said, it was 1,000 people, 500 of them buy. So because you don't cloud that point with other traffic from like stacking things and the rest of your email list that's not that doesn't even know about that series or isn't that far, you get this really clean, pure signal going into Amazon. And when Amazon sees that, they're like, oh, this conversion rate is crazy. It's silly. It's like 5 times the market genre average. I can find more people like this, and they're going to prioritize you in their marketing because all they're trying to do, again, is remember, they're trying to connect the proper product to the proper customer. So now you've given them a really clean signal to amplify. If you do the opposite and you just say, well, I'm launching this book and I'm trying to drive up my rank and I'm going to run discount shopping stuff on top of it and people I found over here and all this. And now all those people show up, and instead of you sending 1,000 people and 500 of them buying, you send traffic of 25,000 people and only 500 buy. You just drove down. You are the reason why your conversion rate is so low. And they're going to go, you're like everybody else. Why should we give you any of our precious emails or page marketing or prioritize you in search? Because you're not going to sell books for me. And this is all being decided by a computer in microseconds.
So it seems as if in order to fully understand one's audience and know what it takes to enable them to self-nurture and meet their needs and so on, then the more directly you're interacting with them, the better, which makes it sound, which highlights the benefit of having, for example, a direct sale platform. Like I sell my books on PayHip, and then you can do very sophisticated segmenting about,
Yes.
targeting readers who have read through a certain amount of your series or whatever it is. At the same time, then driving them to Amazon, you're raising your profile on that very popular platform, and yet you're sending them away from the place where you're getting the most close association with them. So how do you balance direct sales with driving people to bigger online platforms?
I think it depends where you are in your career and what's going on and how long you're prepared to wait for stuff. So I've got people that are coming to me now are very early in their career and they're like, I'm not going to commit to one platform. I'm going to start out wide. And it's like, well, in that genre that you're picking, you're going to make your time to success take longer, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. Just understand the decision you make. You're going into a market where it's just going to take longer. Now, all of my clients that have established themselves on that platform and maybe even are right now very dependent on KU, we are actively working to broaden our businesses off of that platform and go direct. And it's not because, well, I don't like Amazon. Amazon's awesome. It's because of what we said earlier. I can tell so much more about my customer and I can control the customer experience. I have 100% control of what they're going to land on and how I'm going to treat them, whose ads are like, if I want to show other authors' ads on my page, I can, but I get to decide, right? Like, not that I would ever do that, but like, I don't have a situation where they're deciding whose ads get shown on my page, right? That experience, I believe, helps really set what we talked about earlier, which is treating customers like you would like them to be treated. Like, how would you like to be treated? And I know this for a fact because we've seen it, is when you get this working right with the direct store, and when you advertise in the future, and you would just be advertising to your direct store with what all your different advertising strategies, you'll see follow-on sales on all the other platforms, because a lot of people will see the ad and they won't even click on your ad. They'll be like, oh, that's an interesting book. And they go to their favorite platform.
Yep.
Now, what we've done with some clients is who've been very heavy in KU, it's like, listen, you've got this market locked up and they're not coming out. They got a great deal there. Why would they leave? Change when you sell to them and how you sell and what you sell, right? So maybe it's about, well, I'm going to go and focus my direct store on a much higher price point, and I'm going to look for a completely different audience, and I'm going to market in a different way to get that audience. So there's two different kind of ways. Like, well, I'm going to use this kind of as my store as my flagship, where like it's the best experience, it's the best value, and it's where I send all my ads to, and then I get follow-on stuff that happens on the other platforms. Or I'm saying, well, when I do build my store, I'm going to take this approach of looking for a different ideal customer. So I'll give you an example. A client that I work with, very, very successful in KU, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in KU. We decided to do a direct store. And when we did the direct store, what we focused on was solely audio. That's it. And we started from scratch. We didn't use his existing mailing list. We started from scratch looking for high volume, willing to pay full price audio listeners. That's not a KU reader.
Right. So it's another way of segmenting. You're segmenting by retail platform in addition to all those other things you talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that case, it was a strategic decision. It's like, well, a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to move. I'm going to go direct, and I'm going to do it from the perspective of, well, I'll release my products direct first, and then I'll go wide. And then maybe down the road, I'll throw them into KU when I feel that I'm in a discount strategy. I'm not ignoring KU. It's just, they say my book's worth $1.54. It's not worth $1.54 right now. So you don't get it. It's worth $6.99, and I'm selling it for $6.99 elsewhere. And when I think I'll do discounts, then I'll put it over there and I'll sell it for $1.54. Right.
Yeah.
So those are both viable strategies, and they have to fit with your comfort level and understanding of the work that's involved in either of those strategies. None of them are bad. I think that's the great thing about the world we live in today as an indie author is, and we kind of talked about this earlier about don't try and do everything. Try and do what's right for your brand and your bandwidth. And I've never seen anybody successful at running from thing to thing, whether that's genres or marketing tactics. The ones that win are the ones that like get in a lane and stay there because they know, okay, I am going to prove out to this audience that I am a reliable supplier of story.
And if someone is very early in their career, maybe they're just about to launch their first indie published book, and they want to take some steps to ensure that they're, if not in the right lane, at least headed for the right lane, or they see where that lane is taking them. Is there a thing or two that you can advise they should do in order to lay the groundwork to make the future trip smoother?
Yeah, I think, when you can find a space where you love like to write that genre and there's a significant audience there, right? And the question, like, if that's the only thing that you could write the rest of your life, that you would be okay with that. And that there is space there to do. Now, the cool thing is it doesn't, I've got clients in science fiction romance making mid six figures, multiple ones doing this, male romance, right? Like the things you would think are really niche are not that small when you don't have to have a lot of middlemen in there. Like you can get the money to make, but you have to commit to that. So it doesn't mean like you just can only write, thrillers or rom-coms, right? Like there's more places to go on that. If you can do that, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, because a lot of people that come to me, I'll have on my free calls when I talk to them, they're like, I don't know what's not working, because I've written science fiction, I've written fantasy, I've written medical thrillers, and I'm just not sure why I'm not taking off. And it's like, well, you've never given anybody a place to build any critical mass. Those things are so different. It's like you started your business 3 times, because you have to have a good quality book. Like I read it and I'm satisfied, but then you also have to prove that you can deliver books on a regular basis. You look at the genre of paranormal romance. There are a few people that are making a lot of money, but if you look at that tail, it's huge. And indie authors have kind of screwed this market up, because so many people have come in, they've bought some great covers, they've started a series and they've never finished it. So now readers, they won't even, wow, the cover looks cool, I like the idea, but I'm not even going to start this series until I know it's done. Well, whose fault is that? And a lot of times when I talk to authors that are have committed this sin, and it's like, are you a voracious reader? Oh yeah. Do you read any series that isn't done? Oh no, I never start a series until I know it's done. It's like, okay, like why should anybody else be different? Or, like I remember early on, I was at, it was when the rapid release thing was coming out, and everyone was hot on it. And I had this realization where somebody was talking to me and they're like, well, I'm going to put out book 1, and the money I make on that, I'll use to get the cover for book 2 and book 3. And I'm like, what genre? Remind me the genre you're writing. Like, well, I'm going to write epic fantasy. I'm like, dude, this is like designed to fail. What? Why? Well, because in your genre, nobody even starts a series till book 3. Like, it's like a trilogy just means one book to those people. And so you're going to put what little money you have into that first book. And then you're going to get really disappointed because it doesn't make enough money to even pay itself off, let alone give you money to do book 2. Your model, like, now this is just business stuff. You need to go save the money to get through 3-book launch. It's thousands of dollars. Covers, editing, thousands of dollars. To know that you have a chance of this thing succeeding, because your current plan, the only thing epic is the fail that's going to happen. Right.
Well, it does make it sound as if a concrete step people could take would be to go and join all the reader groups they can find, whether that be online or in person, related to the genre you think you want to write, because you only have to have a couple dozen people in a Facebook group say, yeah, I'm really looking forward to when this series is finished so that I can start it and see how it is to get that message. And I think that we end up spending a lot of time talking about, spending time with our fellow authors, but spending time with the readers that we want to attract without telling them you're an author. Just joining them as a fellow reader could be sort of a practical first step for people to take.
Yeah, that's the beauty of today's world, is like, you're not in this vacuum. Like, you can go in Facebook groups and you could do what you just said. You can go into a genre that you're interested in and read all the reviews and get what people love and what people hate, right? Like, that's product research. You can go, in some of these genres, you can go to reader events. You can sit there and listen to talk to readers, right? You don't need to tell them you're an author. You just, like, there's amazing ways where you can find out what people are looking for. And to our kind of our earlier point is, like, validate whether what you think the market really wants is what the market really wants, right? It's like something I've seen happens a lot with lawyers that come into writing fiction. And this is going to sound horrible, but they have to kind of dumb down their writing. It's because they've been trained at this really high level of writing, which makes them good writers, But then they have to like, well, no, what you have to understand is like the average education level in this country isn't your education level or your, the person that was your other thing, the guy that was supposed to read that document was somebody with your education level or higher. Right. Now so like the ones that can get there, like then their thing takes off. But when they're like trying to like, well, my stuff's got to be more upbrow, doesn't.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for being so patient about following my meandering series of
No, I love
questions.
it.
It's a super complex topic, and I loved going through the questions in your audit. Although I wasn't always happy with the answers I was having to get for myself, but it's wonderful food for thought. And thank you again. Please let the listeners know where they can go to find out more about you and the marketing audit and everything you do online.
Sure. And I think like that experience that you had is the right experience. It's not the point that like, oh, like I'm really weak in all these areas. It's like, well, now now you have your score.
Yeah.
Now just pick one of them and work on it and get it better. And then when you'll realize that, oh, when I have more confidence in this and I could go back and say, well, I don't rate it as a 2 anymore. I rate it as a 3 or a 4. It's like, oh, I also happen to be selling more books too. I wonder if they're correlated.
Yeah.
So to your question, like go to joesolari.com, JOESOLARI.com. And there's a lot of things for people to do once they get there. So if you want to go right to this marketing audit, then it's joesolari.com/AMA. And they'll bring you right there, can answer those questions. You'll get your score. And if you want, you can get a series of emails that will talk through. I think there's like almost 30 emails talking through all these different points and what to do. And also this, you'll see when you're looking at my site, I know it's all nonfiction stuff, but think about how I am thinking about my audience and how it's built for my audience. And you may need to change some things for fiction, but like the principles are there. Like this marketing I give you something. I'm trying to help you to get to a point. You're going to get some emails along the way. All that's about is me building a relationship with you. Right. Some people are going to be like, yeah, I just want my score. I'm out of here. God bless. Right. Because what I believe is down the road, when they're in the right place, if they know that I'm a resource, they'll come back and be like, oh yeah, that Solari guy might be able to help me. The other thing that's super important is if you go there's a spot where you can sign up for a free call with me. So I have office hours on Thursday mornings. They tend to book up because they're free, but I'm available to talk specifically about your business. And 2 things on this. One is some stuff just isn't appropriate to be like talked about in a Facebook group, and because we get into tax issues, business stuff and personal things. So that's one of the reasons why I do these calls. The other thing is this is again, an example of thinking about my marketing. So I could take what I spent, what an hour of time costs with me, and spend it on Facebook ads and get really crappy results. Or I could take the time to help an author that's looking actively to be helped and give them my time and build that relationship. And hopefully the outcome of that is, which there's a common goal here. I want them to be so successful and make so much money that they can just go hire me to do their books and payroll and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So like there's aligned interests. So
yeah,
if you're wondering, I don't care if you haven't even written a book yet, you can sign up. There's no qualifications.
Great. Well, I think that's an excellent representation of a lot of what that we've been talking about today. And thank you very much, Joe. This has been great.
Thanks, Matty. It's a pleasure being here. And I really appreciate getting the chance to come and talk to your listeners and viewers about my favorite subject.